With the Chicago Bulls going from one of the worst to best teams in the entire NBA, conversations about specific players and the team in general have been going absolutely wild. In particular, a lot of talks have been centered around Bulls' new acquisition DeMar DeRozan, because to say he has been balling out is an understatement, and some would even go as far as saying that he should be a top candidate for the NBA MVP award. Today we have to talk Chicago Bulls, in particular taking a deep dive into what we've seen from DeMar DeRozan so far and a few things that need to happen for DeRozan to have a chance at winning the MVP award. But before we get into all of that, we are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before my birthday in February, so if you enjoy the content, it would be absolutely clutch if you subscribed if you're new and join the Woods crew. But with all that being said, let's talk Chicago Bulls and DeMar DeRozan. Before we talk about this year's DeRozan though, I think it's very important that we take a step back and look at his career in general, because honestly, this leap by DeRozan isn't really a huge surprise. Throughout his career, DeRozan has always been a great player. Sure, there were some holes in his game, but that didn't matter because he made up for it in other aspects of his game. We all know that DeRozan has been an all-star caliber player consistently since he hit his stride with the Toronto Raptors, but after this occurred is where things got truly interesting for DeMar. As you all know, in 2019, the Toronto Raptors traded away their franchise player in DeMar DeRozan in exchange for Kawhi Leonard. This did work out for the Raptors, being that they won a championship, but for DeMar, well, the same isn't necessarily true. In San Antonio, DeRozan was the clear-cut best player, but to put it simply, there was no talent around him. The team did try to get back in a winning state like they had been for the past few decades, but it just didn't happen. Due to this being the case, DeMar DeRozan became criminally underrated among all NBA fans, which led to the assumption that he couldn't be the quote-unquote guy on a top team anymore. But boy were they wrong. Since his new change of scenery, DeMar DeRozan has been putting on an absolute clinic, averaging 26.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 4.1 assists per game for the Bulls. This sudden surge of offensive productivity has gotten a lot of people talking, and even brought up a big question of whether or not DeRozan could take home the MVP award. The short answer to this is a definite yes. After all, DeRozan is playing the best basketball of his career and his team is winning, but there are a few things that need to happen in order to make this come true, some of which are in the control of DeRozan and some of which aren't. Starting with the most obvious and important aspect of the DeRozan MVP hunt, the man has to keep up his production on both sides of the ball at the very least, but honestly, probably improve it. It's no secret that the MVP award is one of the hardest awards to receive, especially for someone like DeRozan. Sure, the man is getting a lot more recognition now, but compared to players like Curry, Durant, or even Giannis, DeMar DeRozan will have to impress so much with his stat sheet that voters have no choice but to give him their vote. Like mentioned, DeRozan is averaging an elite 26 and 5 and 4 at the moment, but in my eyes, realistically to be a frontrunner, I believe he will have to up these numbers slightly, possibly nearing a 30-point per game average. Taking a look at the past 5 MVPs of the league in Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, it is very clear that you need to stuff the stat sheet, get your team a top 3 seed, and look like a clear-cut #1 option while doing so. And in the case of Russell Westbrook, well, he did all of this, so enough slander on him right now. For DeRozan's stats, I believe it's a lot more realistic to see an increase in scoring as opposed to rebounds, because that is typically the thing that can change the most for a player throughout the season. In other words, it's a lot more likely for DeRozan to catch fire and start having consistent 30-point games than it is for him to start doubling his rebounds for the rest of the season. Don't get me wrong here, the stats are already great for DeMar, but the fact is, great isn't good enough for the MVP award. The stat sheet for DeRozan has to be on another level. Competing with other players in the NBA isn't the only reason why DeRozan needs to better his numbers though, because one of the biggest things I believe gets in the way of DeRozan is his own teammate Zach Lavine. If you've been watching the Bulls at all, you would know that Zach Lavine has been balling out as well, averaging 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. This is no surprise because we saw this last year, but when you have 2 players that good on one team, it actually decreases their chances at an MVP substantially. When people vote for the MVP, they take value into consideration a lot. What I mean by that is oftentimes the MVP of a team is a player who stands far above the rest of their teammates, and usually their team would be terrible without them. Taking a look at the previous MVPs once again, Nikola Jokic was statistically by far the best player on his team, and guess what? The same goes for Giannis on the Bucks, Harden on the Rockets, and Russ on the Thunder. When there are 2 good players on a team that are worthy of the MVP, this causes voters to split votes among both players. And obviously, this means that DeRozan would get half the amount of votes that he should have, being that Lavine is also playing at an elite level. Now, I'm not saying I want Lavine to take a step down by any means, because he has been by far one of my favorite players in the league to watch this year, but for DeRozan to realistically have a chance at the MVP award, he has to step his stats up, and Lavine has to possibly regress, so DeMar is the clear-cut best player on the Bulls, or else he likely won't win. But aside from the stats, there are also a couple of things that have to happen for DeMar to win the MVP, one of those things being the Bulls taking the #1 seed in the East. Going into the season, this seems like a pretty unrealistic goal for the Chicago Bulls. After all, this team needed time to mesh and figure out their games together in order to win. right? Well, to the surprise of many, the Bulls came out firing on all cylinders, and at the moment have attained the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference after going on multiple mid-season win streaks. Now, don't get me wrong here, this could very well change, being that there are a lot of teams like the Nets that are within just a couple of games from the Bulls. But in my eyes, this team has officially proved they could have the 1 seed in the East by the end of the season, which would most definitely help DeRozan's case of the MVP award. But aside from the record of the team, the MVP award also comes down to how good the team was because of the player, and usually the team has to be at least a top 3 seed to be considered for the award. But for DeRozan, I believe anything short of the 1 seed takes him out of the running. To show why I think this, let's take a look at something called win shares for a player. If you didn't know, this basically takes a bunch of stats to determine how many wins the player has gotten for the team because of their value on the court. Looking at DeRozan so far this season, he has an elite win share total of 3.5. Kevin Durant, who I just mentioned is also a frontrunner for the MVP, also has a win share of 3.5. But the favorite for the MVP at the moment in Steph Curry, well, Curry has a total of 3.9. Now you might be thinking, DeMar's right up there with KD and Steph, so why does he need to have the 1 seed to win? And well, what this comes down to is popularity, because like it or not, this plays a role in who wins the award. Players like Curry and KD have a ton of hype this season, and numbers to back it up, which will already persuade voters to vote for them. Not to mention, both KD and Steph according to many are due for an MVP award because they haven't won in a while, and well, they've been very dominant this season. Like I said, for DeRozan to win this thing, he has to be substantially better stats-wise than both Curry and Durant, and this includes win shares as well. Now he did just hit 2 back-to-back buzzer beaters, which does help his win shares, but he has to do even more if he wants to have a chance at the MVP award compared to these guys. If DeMar is able to better his stats and lead the Bulls to the 1 seed with a win share total greater than the players I just mentioned, voters won't really have a choice but to throw this man a vote, because like I always say, the stats don't lie. And don't get it twisted when I say players like Curry, Durant, Jokic, and Giannis are a lot more popular than DeRozan. All I'm saying is that despite his great season, this man is criminally underrated compared to these other stars, which in turn will lead to less MVP votes. So far, everything that I've mentioned is somewhat in the control of DeMar DeRozan. The man can definitely go out there and score more, and well, that should also lead to more wins for the team as a whole. I do know that external factors like injuries or health and safety protocols could happen again, which could lead to a worse record that isn't in DeRozan's control, but for the most part, I would say that he has the ability to make the 2 things I mentioned happen. The last thing, however, is something out of the control of DeMar that has nothing to do with him. It has to do with Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. Unless you have been living under a rock, you would know that the Golden State Warriors have been dominating this season, led by the MVP frontrunner Steph Curry. Not only that, but unlike the Bulls with multiple stars, the Warriors up until recently didn't have other star players in the lineup aside from Curry, which makes what he's doing even more impressive. The man has been on fire, plain and simple, which means that in order for DeRozan to even have a chance against Curry, he will have to regress in some way, shape, or form. Is this very likely to happen? Well, if I'm being honest, no. If you've been watching Curry, you would know that he's been balling out at the highest level and has all the hype to go with it. Not to mention, it's leading to wins for the 1-seeded Warriors team. But even though it is unlikely, I think it is happening right now as we speak, because Curry has been absolutely cold, which helps DeRozan's case for MVP even more. But on top of that, I believe there is one thing that could happen that gives DeMar a better chance, that thing revolving around the return of Klay Thompson. If you didn't know, Klay Thompson has been injured for nearly 3 years and just recently came back to the Warriors team. No one really knew what to expect from Klay, but at the moment, it looks like he will in fact return to his all-star form, and this will help DeRozan's chances at an MVP even more. Just like the Lavine-DeRozan situation, if Klay and Steph Curry are both putting up crazy numbers, it takes away from their chances at an MVP. So if Klay comes back like an all-star player, this evens the playing field as far as all-star teammates go in the MVP race. DeMar has Lavine, Steph has Klay, and Durant has Harden. All in all, I'll be completely honest with you guys. Between popularity, skills, and winning, it seems like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo all have an upper hand compared to DeRozan. Some would say this is purely because they're having better seasons. Others might say that it's because Lavine has similar numbers to DeRozan. But in my eyes, DeMar is on the same level as these players, and we've seen what he's been able to do for this Bulls team. I mean, the man just hit back-to-back game winners, and it is very clear that the hype is rising for this once underrated player. I am rooting for DeRozan, but even then, I can't deny that Curry is playing some of the best basketball we've ever seen. But even though this is the case, Curry isn't Superman. The man is cooling off, so DeRozan's chances just keep on getting better and better. MVP or not, DeRozan has been absolutely balling, so much so that to close out this video, I wanted to show you guys Michael Jordan's record that DeMar DeRozan beat this season. This season, in his first 16 games, DeMar DeRozan racked up 425 points, which got him the most points in the first 16 games of the season for any Bulls player of all time, with Michael Jordan only trailing by 1 point at 424. Now, is this an oddly specific stat? Yes, and I won't deny that at all. In fact, I will even say that this stat by ESPN is dumb, because prime DeMar DeRozan barely beat Michael Jordan's rookie numbers. But hey, MJ is MJ, and this does show that DeRozan has been balling out, even if it's an oddly specific stat like this. What a lot of this will come down to is the playoffs, because in the past, DeRozan has underperformed and disappointed when the lights are the brightest. But this time, I think this time might just be different for DeRozan and the Bulls. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you all on the next one. Woods out.